I knew spilling coffee on him would ruin my day, but I didn't expect it to ruin my life. Or maybe it saved it. I'm Emma, just another barista in a city that never sleeps, juggling too many shifts and too little sleep. My hands always tremble when the line is long, my smile always a little forced, my life comfortably ordinary, until that Tuesday. It had started like any other morning, the smell of roasted coffee beans thick in the air, steam swirling around the espresso machine like it had secrets of its own. I'd already run through 3 double shots before the morning rush even truly began, my hair tied back in a messy bun, the edges of my apron dusted with stray coffee grounds. Everything about me screamed routine, predictability, the safe kind of life that feels invisible in a city this big. I liked my little world. Simple, orderly. Predictable. Until him. He was sitting at the corner table, the kind of corner that felt like it belonged to someone like him, the kind of person whose life could easily slip through the cracks of normal, the kind who carried an invisible aura that made the air shift when he entered a room. Laptop open, fingers gliding across the keys like he owned the universe, a slight frown on his face as if he were deep in some world that none of the rest of us could touch. And in that moment, I was acutely aware of how messy my own world was. I was balancing 3 drinks in a tray, trying not to let my trembling hands betray my nerves as the line of impatient commuters stretched longer than I could handle. And then, in what I can only describe as a collision of fate and clumsiness, disaster struck. The coffee tipped. Not just a small spill. Not a gentle drip. It leapt like it had a vendetta, hot liquid hissing as it splashed across the polished surface of his laptop. My heart stopped mid-beat, my chest tightened, and for a second, the entire cafe seemed to freeze around me. Oh no, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I stammered, mortified, my voice barely audible over the shocked gasps of the nearby customers. I could feel my face heating up in a way that made the back of my neck burn. My hands shook as I reached for napkins, any attempt at salvaging what I could. But I was too late. Way too late. He looked down at the mess, at the coffee seeping into the edges of his expensive-looking laptop, and then, he laughed. Just laughed. It wasn't a casual chuckle. It wasn't polite. It was a warm, deep laugh that felt like it had been waiting for me all along, and it caught me completely off guard. My mouth hung open, and I froze, unsure if I should crawl under the counter or vanish into thin air. Relax, he said, voice smooth, low, warm in a way that made my knees go weak. It's just a laptop. It can be replaced. You can't. I blinked at him. Blinked again. Did he really just say that? Who laughs when someone ruins their laptop with hot coffee? Who says something like that without a trace of sarcasm, without a hint of anger, without even the faintest flicker of irritation? Okay, but... I started, words failing me, my brain scrambling for something coherent to say. I didn't mean... You didn't, he interrupted, but it wasn't sharp. It was easy, casual. A shrug like spilling coffee was the most ordinary thing in the world. He looked at me like I was, what? Interesting? Entertaining? Maybe both. And for reasons I couldn't explain, my stomach twisted. A strange combination of relief and dread settled over me. Relief because he wasn't yelling. Dread because, what if he wasn't angry, but something else entirely was about to happen? I grabbed more napkins and began blotting at the mess, fumbling and apologizing at the same time. I swear I'm usually not this clumsy, I said, my voice small, almost embarrassed. I don't know why today, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, still smiling. Hey, it's fine. Really? Life's too short to get upset over spilled coffee. Unless it's spilled on me, he added, a mischievous glint in his eye. That glint, the way it danced over the sharp angles of his face, the way it made him impossible to read, made my chest pound in a way I wasn't ready for. My pulse was erratic, betraying me, while my hands still trembled from the shock of the spill. I wanted to apologize again, but the words lodged in my throat, tangled with something else, curiosity. That thrill that comes when someone in your ordinary, predictable life suddenly steps out of the shadows and into your messy, everyday world. I can grab another laptop if you, I started, my voice uncertain. He waved me off. No need. I'll get it fixed. Honestly, the real problem is that you're trembling like you just ran a marathon carrying 3 drinks. You okay? I laughed nervously, trying to mask the flustered heat creeping up my neck. Yeah, I'm fine. Just tired, I guess. Tired, huh? He said, leaning back slightly. He had this way of observing me that made it feel like he could see everything, the little cracks, the exhaustion behind my eyes, the way I always tried to hold it all together. Well, maybe you need a break. A real one, not just a sip of coffee. I blinked, caught off guard by his forwardness. He wasn't being creepy. He wasn't hitting on me in the way I expected from someone him. But there was something in his gaze that pulled me in, something dangerous yet comforting at the same time. I should get back to work, I murmured, but my words lacked conviction. That's the thing about work, he said softly, almost conspiratorially, sometimes it doesn't get the memo that life's happening all around it. I wanted to tell him that life for me wasn't happening all around it. Life was routine. Coffee, customers, cleaning, sleep, repeat. Nothing glamorous. Nothing dangerous. Nothing like this. And yet, here he was, laughter lingering in the air, that spark of chaos and warmth, and suddenly my ordinary world felt fragile, temporary. I turned back to the counter, trying to focus on the steaming cups waiting for pickup, but I couldn't. I could feel his eyes on me, patient, steady, like he wasn't just watching me, he was seeing me. And it made me squirm. Not because I wanted to impress him, but because I felt exposed in a way I hadn't in years. Emma, he said, finally, and I jumped slightly, like he'd read my thoughts. Don't let one little accident ruin your day. Or mine. Life's messy. Coffee spills, people collide, sometimes, magic happens in the mess. Magic. That word hung in the air between us, ridiculous yet electric. I wanted to laugh, roll my eyes, insist he was insane, but all I could do was stare. Because the truth was, I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that maybe spilling coffee on a stranger's laptop could be the start of something more than my ordinary, safe life. The line behind me groaned impatiently. I had orders to fill, mouths to feed, schedules to keep. But every instinct in my body wanted to linger, to stay, to see what else he would say. And yet, I moved. I returned to the counter, plastering a smile on my face that didn't quite reach my eyes. Here, your drinks are ready, I said, voice steadier now, though my hands still betrayed me. He took the tray with that calm, assured way that made him look effortless, like the chaos around him barely touched his world. Thanks, Emma, he said, and there it was again, my name, his voice dipping low, warm, deliberate. A simple sound that sent a jolt through me like electricity, and I cursed myself for noticing it so much. You're welcome, I murmured, and I could feel my cheeks flushing. And then he smiled. Not just a polite, courteous smile, but one that lingered, softened his sharp features, and made the cafe seem smaller, cozier, warmer. I'll see you around, Emma, he said, and I wanted to ask, when? Where? Why? But I didn't. I just nodded, clutched the espresso shot in my hands a little too tightly, and watched him leave. The cafe door swung shut behind him, the bell ringing, and I realized I was trembling all over again. Not from the coffee this time. Not from the near disaster. But from him. From the way he made me feel seen, noticed, alive in a way that my routine life never had. And then, of course, the next day, fate, or whatever cruel, thrilling force runs the universe, decided to intervene. I was wiping down tables when the bell above the door rang. I looked up, expecting the usual stream of commuters and students, the normal hum of the city in miniature. And there he was. Standing in the doorway, laptop bag slung casually over his shoulder, jacket slightly wet from the morning drizzle. He caught my gaze and smirked, that same effortless, disarming smile. My stomach twisted. "You again," I said, attempting nonchalance but failing miserably. "Yeah," he said simply, walking over. "Seems like the city's got a thing for coincidences. Or maybe just me running into you." I wanted to roll my eyes, to act annoyed, to tell myself that I shouldn't get caught up in this. But my lips betrayed me, twitching upward against my will. "Or maybe it's me running into you," I said, voice quieter than I intended. And then, he laughed again. That laugh. That infuriating, mesmerizing laugh that made the air between us crackle like static. I should have gone back to work. I should have told myself to stop thinking about him, stop noticing the way his hair curled slightly at the nape of his neck, stop feeling my chest squeeze when he tilted his head in that calculating, charming way. But I didn't. Because something had shifted. And whatever it wasn't going back into the box labeled ordinary life anytime soon. I wanted to crawl under the counter, to disappear entirely, but something about the way he said it froze me in place. There was a softness, a teasing quality, that made my pulse stutter in a way I didn't understand. My hands, which had been trembling from the coffee incident, felt suddenly heavy in my apron pockets. I could barely look away from him, from the way his eyes caught the morning light streaming through the cafe window. They were sharp and magnetic, but not just that, they held secrets. Deep ones. Dangerous ones. And maybe, just maybe, a little trouble. I kept thinking I'd never see him again. Surely, this was a one-time collision in the chaos of the city, one of those moments that New York loves to orchestrate for brief flashes of excitement, and then swallows whole. Surely, I would go back to my ordinary life, wiping espresso shots off the counter, dodging impatient customers, living the same rhythm of safe, predictable days. But New York has a strange, mischievous way of meddling in people's lives. It's a city that hums with coincidences, orchestrates chance encounters, and sometimes, it seems, conspires to play Cupid when you least expect it. Coffee shops, street corners, even the subway, he was everywhere. Not stalking, not intentionally, but everywhere just the same. And every time I saw him, my chest jumped, my stomach twisted, and my brain betrayed me with 1,000 reasons why this was a terrible idea. The first time I saw him again, I almost didn't recognize him. He was leaning against the platform railing, coat collar turned up against the biting winter wind, eyes fixed on his phone. The same laptop bag slung over his shoulder, the same confident way of carrying himself, and yet, different. Lighter, more relaxed. As if our little accident had somehow rewritten a line of the script I'd been following for years. I should have looked away, focused on catching my train, pretending I had no interest, no memory of the laughter, no lingering heat from that first encounter. But my feet moved before my mind could intervene, and suddenly, I was standing beside him on the edge of the subway platform, the wind whipping past us in sharp gusts that smelled faintly of wet asphalt and snow. "You again," I said, attempting to sound nonchalant, but my voice betrayed me. It was higher than normal, and it shook just enough to make me internally cringe. He looked up from his phone, and the smile that spread across his face was infuriatingly effortless. "Yeah," he said, voice calm, confident, low, like it belonged in a movie, like the city itself had dipped it in gold. "Seems like the city's got a thing for coincidences. Or maybe just me running into you." I felt my cheeks burn. I wanted to roll my eyes, to tell myself this was ridiculous, that I shouldn't even be talking to him, that my life had rules, boundaries, limits. But all I could do was fidget with the strap of my tote bag, twisting it around my fingers as my pulse raced. "Or maybe it's me running into you," I said, trying for teasing, trying for playful, trying for something that didn't sound like I was falling completely apart under his gaze. My words barely made it past my lips, and yet, somehow, they landed in the air between us perfectly. He laughed. That laugh. The one that made my stomach leap and my heartbeat stutter. I wanted to cover my ears and run and listen at the same time. It was infuriating and captivating, all at once, a sound that should have been forbidden but somehow wasn't. And then, the subway train arrived with a screech, metal wheels grinding against the tracks, people rushing to get on, but somehow, the world slowed down around us. I noticed everything, the small flecks of gold in his eyes, the faint scent of his cologne that reminded me of cedar and something sharp, the way his coat flared as he shifted on his feet. Every detail burned into me, as if the universe itself had magnified him so I couldn't ignore a single thing. We rode the train in silence for a moment, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him, my shoulder brushing his as people squeezed past us in the crowded car. Every time he moved slightly, my stomach fluttered, every glance, every tilt of his head made me feel both grounded and unmoored at the same time. "You work around here?" he asked casually, voice cutting through the rumble of the train, but there was an undercurrent in it, a curiosity, an interest, something that wasn't casual at all. I nodded, suddenly aware of the small laugh I let slip, the nervous energy in my tone. "Yeah, just a cafe down the street. Keeps me busy. Keeps me sane." He tilted his head, considering, as if weighing the truth of my words against something only he could see. "Busy, huh? Sane? That's a delicate balance," he said softly, and my pulse jumped again. Every word he spoke seemed deliberate, carefully measured, yet somehow unintentional at the same time. Dangerous. Addictive. And that's when it hit me. Fate. Call it coincidence, call it luck, call it a cruel trick of the universe, but the way he kept appearing, the way he lingered at the edge of my life like a storm I couldn't escape, it was intentional in its own chaotic way. The city had a plan, and maybe, just maybe, I was meant to be caught in it. Over the next few days, it became inevitable. I'd be walking home after a long shift, tired to the bone, hands sticky with leftover coffee, and there he'd be, leaning against the lamppost outside the corner deli, scrolling through his phone, looking impossibly casual in jeans and a jacket that made him look like he had stepped out of a magazine. "You again," I'd murmur, the phrase becoming a sort of ritual between us. "Maybe the universe is trying to tell us something," he'd reply, that corner of his mouth quirking just so, eyes glinting with a humor I couldn't decipher. And I'd feel it again, the pulse of excitement, the flicker of fear, the undeniable magnetism that drew me toward him even when logic screamed at me to step back. He wasn't just a stranger anymore, he was a presence that threaded itself through my days, appearing at moments I didn't expect but couldn't ignore. It was dangerous, of course. I told myself it was just curiosity, just coincidence, just the city's way of giving me something different in my routine life. But deep down, I knew it was more. So much more. Every accidental brush of his hand when we passed on the street, every shared laugh over a spilled coffee or a subway mishap, every lingering glance across a crowded room, it built something I wasn't ready to name. I began noticing things I hadn't before. The way his eyes softened when he looked at someone struggling with bags. The subtle tension in his shoulders when he checked his phone too often. The way he never quite let anyone else invade the space around him, like he was guarding something precious. And every time I saw him, my heart did that same impossible thing. It leapt, twisted, fluttered, a storm I couldn't calm. I hated how much I noticed. Hated how much I wanted to notice. I told myself he was out of reach, a world too big for my ordinary life, and yet I kept running into him. One evening, as we walked side by side along the edge of the river, the city lights reflecting on the dark water, the wind carrying the faint scent of hot pretzels from a nearby vendor, I tried to push my feelings into words. "Why do you keep showing up everywhere?" I asked, voice almost a whisper, the question more for myself than him. "Maybe the universe is trying to tell us something," he said again, corner of his mouth lifting in that infuriatingly perfect smirk. He didn't elaborate, didn't give me a map or a roadmap, just left the words hanging between us, a puzzle I couldn't solve. And I realized then that I didn't want to solve it. Not yet. There was a thrill in not knowing, in feeling like I was part of something larger, unpredictable, uncontrollable. That night, as the wind whipped through the streets and I walked home alone, I kept replaying the moments, the words, the accidental touches. I told myself to be cautious. I told myself this was impossible. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking about him. By the time I reached my apartment, the city was alive around me, the honking cars, the chatter of late-night wanderers, the flicker of neon signs, but in my head, there was only him. Only the pull of those eyes, the warmth of that laugh, the danger of feeling something so entirely unexpected. And I knew, in the quiet, that this was only the beginning. I should have run. I should have turned on my heel, walked away, and convinced myself I was safe in the rhythm of my ordinary life. But I didn't. Because he wasn't just anyone. He wasn't a stranger in the city, one more blurred face in a sea of hurried commuters. He was bigger. Bigger than my safe, predictable life. Bigger than the cafe where I poured steaming coffee into paper cups day after day, bigger than the cramped apartment that smelled faintly of vanilla air freshener and old books. He was a universe I hadn't been invited to, one that glittered in ways I didn't think were meant for me. Invitations to exclusive events, evenings in skyscrapers where the city lights stretched like constellations below us, rooftops with glass railings and champagne that smelled like celebration and whispered promises. It was dazzling. I felt out of place, a girl with tired eyes and calloused hands, standing beside him in designer clothes and shoes that clicked on polished floors. I felt like a character in someone else's story, like an extra who'd accidentally wandered onto a set. And yet, I also felt alive. Thrilled in a way I hadn't known since I was a teenager sneaking out of school to meet someone dangerous, exciting, forbidden. Every glance he threw my way made my heart stutter. Every accidental brush of his hand, against mine as we reached for the same door, against my shoulder as we walked down crowded streets, made my stomach flip and my knees weak. I hated how much I wanted him. Absolutely hated it. It was irrational, reckless, embarrassing. And yet, every time he said my name, Emma, like it was a soft punctuation in a sentence only he could understand, something in me broke open. Something tender, something fragile, something that had been locked away in safe, ordinary routines for years. It was thrilling. Dangerous. Intoxicating. And it terrified me. The first time I realized that he wasn't just charm and glittering lights was subtle, almost imperceptible. I noticed it while walking to a rooftop gala one evening, the streets slick with rain, the neon reflections bouncing in puddles beneath our feet. I kept up a steady conversation, my voice light, joking about the overpriced drinks, about my inability to navigate heels on wet pavement. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him pause. His phone buzzed. A single message. And suddenly, the easy confidence slipped. A shadow crossed his features. Tight shoulders. Furrowed brow. A hesitation in his step. I didn't know the world he lived in. Didn't know the responsibilities, the people, the invisible weight he carried on his back. And I feared it. I feared how it could sweep me up, drag me into something bigger, something dangerous, something I wasn't ready for. And yet, I also craved it. Because the mundane, predictable life I'd built for myself, it had been safe, yes. But it had been empty. And with him, every heartbeat, every glance, every fleeting touch made me feel full. Alive. Dangerous. That night, we walked along a rooftop lined with glass railings that trembled under the wind, overlooking a city that seemed infinite. The rain had stopped, leaving a fresh, electric scent that hung in the air like a promise. The skyline shimmered under the city lights, thousands of windows reflecting a million stories. I kept my gaze low, pretending to admire the city, trying to maintain some semblance of composure, but I felt him watching me, quietly, intensely, like he could see every flicker of emotion across my face. I felt the heat of his hand brush mine as he reached for a glass of champagne. I wanted to pull away, to remind myself that I didn't belong in this world. But I didn't. I let the brush linger. Let the electricity hum through me, threatening to ignite something uncontrollable. Then, without warning, he pressed my hand to his chest. My body stiffened, breath catching in my throat. The warmth radiated from him through my palm, deep and steady, grounding me and unmooring me all at once. Emma. I need to tell you something, he said, voice low, measured, almost too heavy for the space we occupied. I felt the vibration of his words in my chest, in my pulse, in the parts of me I had kept hidden for years. I'm not supposed to be here. Not like this. Not with you. I froze. My mind spun with 1,000 questions, each one sharper than the last. Why not? Why not with me? What did he mean? What had I stumbled into? And yet, my heart leapt against my ribcage, the irrational hope, the longing, screaming louder than logic ever could. Then why are you here? I whispered, almost to myself. My voice cracked slightly, betraying how desperately I wanted to hear the answer, how terrified I was of it. He didn't answer immediately. He just looked at me, and I felt the weight of everything he wasn't saying pressing against me like a physical force. Rain-slicked city lights reflected in his eyes, making them seem endless, dark and bright at the same time. I wanted to lean in, to ask him to tell me anyway, to beg for a world I wasn't ready to enter. You shouldn't be, he said finally, voice softer this time, almost fragile. Not like this. Not with someone like you. It's complicated. Complicated. The word echoed in my mind like a warning bell, but also like a promise. Dangerous and thrilling and impossible. And even though every part of me wanted to run, to protect myself, to retreat into my predictable little life, I couldn't. I didn't. Because the city loves a story. Somehow, ours was scribbled in neon lights across every corner, every wet pavement, every darkened alley we passed. Every accidental meeting, every laugh shared, every moment my pulse spiked when his hand lingered on mine, it was all part of a story the city refused to let me ignore. I had no idea where it would go, no map, no plan. All I knew was that every time I looked at him, my ordinary life felt smaller, duller, lifeless. And every time he looked at me, I felt seen in a way I had never been seen before. The tension built slowly, almost imperceptibly, at first. A touch too long on a crowded train. A glance exchanged over the barista counter at the cafe I still worked at, my hands shaking as I poured a latte for a customer who didn't know the chaos swirling behind my eyes. Every encounter, no matter how brief, left me reeling, replaying it endlessly in my head, questioning my own reactions. I hated how dependent I felt on his presence, how my days suddenly seemed incomplete if I didn't see him at least once, even by accident. I hated the way he made me want to break my own rules, cross boundaries I had carefully erected over years to keep myself safe, predictable, untouchable. And yet, I craved it. I craved him. And then, the moments of ordinary life collided with the extraordinary. One rainy evening, after yet another chance encounter at a quiet cafe tucked in the corner of a bustling street, he took my hand, pressed it against his chest, and the world tilted. I could feel his heartbeat through my palm. Strong. Steady. Real. And I knew then that no amount of caution, no careful planning, could keep me from being drawn into his orbit. Emma, he said again, almost a whisper this time, his breath warm against my ear. I'm not supposed to be here. Not with you. But I am. And I can't ignore it anymore. And I didn't run. I didn't pull my hand away. I stood there, in the rain, heart pounding, chest tight, completely vulnerable and completely alive. Because something inside me, the part of me that had been dormant for too long, recognized what I had been craving without even knowing it. Danger. Excitement. The thrill of stepping into a world bigger than my own. The intoxicating rush of someone who saw me, all of me, and still chose to be here. And in that moment, as the rain-slicked streets reflected the neon glow around us, I realized something terrifying, exhilarating, and entirely inevitable. The ordinary life I had built for myself had ended the moment I met him. And there was no going back. My heart wanted to argue, to scream, to insist, to promise that we could handle it, that somehow, someway, we could exist in this chaos together without it tearing us apart. Every fiber of me screamed that the risk was worth it. Every pulse in my body told me that I wanted him, needed him, and couldn't imagine going back to the life I had before. But logic whispered, insistent and cold, walk away. Walk away, Emma. Run. Protect yourself. Protect your fragile, ordinary life. Protect the part of you that thrives on stability, that knows that falling into someone like him would be dangerous, reckless, intoxicating, and devastating all at once. I don't care about your rules, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. They were bold, defiant, reckless, but the tremor in my voice betrayed me. Even as I said them, I realized how scared I sounded. Scared of losing him. Scared of stepping off the ledge into something I couldn't control. Scared of all the ways he could consume me and leave me broken. And he didn't flinch. Didn't recoil. Didn't tell me I was foolish or that I didn't understand the danger. He simply pulled me close. Breath against my skin, warm and steady despite the chill of the rain that soaked our coats, our hair plastered in damp strands, the smell of him, cologne, cedar, something clean and sharp, mixing with the rain and the faint aroma of the city streets. For a moment, nothing existed but the heat between us. Nothing existed but the press of his body against mine, the electricity of proximity, the magnetic pull that made me forget to breathe, forget to think, forget that the world outside this moment could ever exist. I wanted to melt into him, to forget every rule, every limit, every cautious thought that had kept me safe for years. I wanted to say yes to every unspoken promise in his gaze, every fleeting touch of his hand, every lingering brush of his coat against mine. I wanted to believe that the city, the universe, fate, whatever force had thrown us together, had conspired to give me exactly what I had never dared to hope for. And then it all crashed. The next day, the moment of fragile exhilaration shattered into jagged, cutting pieces. I had been walking down the street, the sky a dull gray, puddles reflecting the towering buildings like mirrors of a world I didn't fully belong to. My thoughts kept drifting back to him, back to last night, to the rain, to the heat of his body pressed against mine, to the words we hadn't spoken aloud but had been screamed between us in silence. I couldn't stop replaying it, the memory looping endlessly in my head, twisting and tightening my chest with longing. And then I saw her. Another woman. Her hair shone in the muted light, styled perfectly, cascading in waves that looked impossibly effortless. Her smile was too easy, too practiced, a smile meant to charm, to claim, to occupy space like she belonged there. And she did, at least, that's what it seemed in the moment my world tipped over. She was touching his arm. Not casually, not by accident. Her hand rested there with a familiarity I couldn't ignore, a comfort that made my stomach knot, a claim I wasn't prepared to challenge. My mind screamed at me, betrayal? Misunderstanding? A cruel joke? But I couldn't stop seeing it. Couldn't stop feeling it. The city moved around me, oblivious. Cars honked. People rushed past, umbrellas held high, shoes splashing through puddles. But I was frozen. Heart pounding. Chest tight. Breath coming in ragged bursts. And then I ran. Like the coward I was. I ran down the wet streets, coat flapping around me, heels clicking against the pavement in uneven rhythms. My hands shook so badly I thought I might topple entirely, my tote bag swinging wildly, smacking against my leg with every step. I couldn't bear to look back. Couldn't bear to see him laughing, smiling, responding to her touch, acknowledging her presence in a way that made my chest ache. My heart shattered with every stride. The memory of our closeness, the warmth of his body pressed to mine in the rain, collided violently with this new image, her hand on his arm, her smile soft and possessive. My stomach turned over, nausea and heartbreak mixed in equal, cruel measure. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't want anyone to see. I didn't want anyone to know how completely he had broken me with a single, silent gesture. But the rain didn't care. It soaked me through, plastering my hair to my face, streaming down my cheeks as if the city itself were mirroring the chaos inside me. I could feel my pulse hammering in my throat, my lungs burning with the effort of running, not from physical exhaustion, but from the emotional storm inside me. Every step echoed with the rhythm of heartbreak, betrayal, confusion, and longing. I hated myself for running. Hated myself for caring. Hated myself for being utterly, irreparably drawn to someone who had suddenly become unreachable. And yet, I couldn't stop. I ducked into a narrow alley, hoping to catch my breath, but instead, I doubled over, pressing my hands to my knees as my body convulsed with sobs I couldn't contain. I could still see her smile, still feel the phantom touch of her hand on him, still hear the laughter I imagined in that instant, sharp and cutting like shards of glass in my chest. I replayed every moment we'd shared, the coffee spill, the accidental meetings, the touch of his hand in the crowded cafe, the way he said my name like it mattered, like it belonged to me. And now, each memory was poisoned with doubt, fear, and jealousy. The intoxicating thrill that had made my life feel electric now felt like a cruel joke. I should have walked away the night before, I reminded myself. Should have heeded logic, should have kept my heart safe, should have protected myself from the kind of chaos I now understood he brought into the world. But no amount of reason could undo what my heart had already done. I pressed my face to my hands, trying to will away the hurt, the confusion, the intense ache that made every breath feel heavy. Every beat of my heart seemed to scream at me, "He's gone. You can't have him." And yet, even in the midst of despair, even in the suffocating weight of heartbreak, I couldn't stop thinking about him. Because no matter the image of her, no matter the fear and the pain, no matter the betrayal, or the misunderstanding, I couldn't erase the memory of the warmth, the laughter, the closeness. I couldn't erase the pulse of excitement every time he appeared, every time he touched my hand, every time he said my name like it was a secret only I should hear. I ran blindly down the streets, through puddles, past the neon glow of shop windows reflecting my distorted, tear-streaked face. The city blurred around me. The honking cars, the chatter of late-night pedestrians, the splatter of rain on asphalt, it all faded into white noise. All I could see, all I could feel, all I could think about, was him. And I knew then, with a crushing, bittersweet certainty, that this wasn't over. That somehow, even with the heartbreak and confusion, even with the woman and the possessive smile and the world I didn't understand, he would find a way to matter to me again. Because in New York, in this sprawling, chaotic city, stories like ours didn't end quietly. Not if your heart refused to let them. Weeks passed. Long, suffocating weeks. I told myself, over and over, that I was done. That I had to be done. That he was a dangerous complication in a life I had finally carved out for myself, a life small, predictable, safe. I buried myself in work, in the rhythmic steam of espresso machines, in the hum of the city that never paused for anyone. I told myself to focus on the ordinary, on the safe, on the small things I could control. I watched the days blur together. Morning to night, night to morning, latte after latte, customer after customer, keeping my hands busy so my heart wouldn't ache, so my mind wouldn't wander to thoughts of him. Because if I allowed myself to think, even for a second, it would be impossible to breathe without imagining him there, leaning in with that crooked smile, the warmth of his hand brushing mine, that spark of something dangerous and exhilarating in his eyes. I convinced myself it was over. That I had survived heartbreak before, this was just another lesson, another scar waiting to form. But then, the message came. It was simple. Minimalist. A few words that made my pulse jump and my stomach turn into a knot of anticipation and fear. Meet me at the old cafe. I can't explain here. I should have ignored it. I should have deleted the message, thrown my phone into the drawer, told myself this was a trap, a cruel joke of memory and longing. Logic screamed at me. Logic whispered, yelled, begged. But my heart didn't listen. I didn't ignore it. I didn't delete it. I stared at the words, my fingers trembling over the screen, heart hammering against my ribcage like it might escape entirely. Every rational thought drowned in a tidal wave of longing, hope, and fear. The rain had started again by the time I left my apartment. The streets were slick, reflections of neon and headlights dancing in the puddles. The air smelled of wet asphalt, of roasted chestnuts from a nearby vendor, of winter lingering like a promise. My coat clung to me, damp at the edges, and my hair plastered itself to my forehead. I barely noticed. My mind was elsewhere, on him, on the message, on what I might find when I stepped into that old cafe. And there he was. Waiting. Eyes intense, like he had been holding the weight of the world in them and only I could see it. Rain dripped from his hair, running down the collar of his coat, but he didn't seem to care. He looked as if he had been waiting for me for hours, though the city's clock told me it had only been minutes. Emma, his voice broke through the hum of the city, low, soft, and urgent. It wasn't what it looked like. My chest tightened. The memory of her, the woman I had seen laughing, touching him, claiming a piece of his world, flared in my mind. But something in the way he looked at me, raw and unguarded, made me pause. Made me consider the possibility that maybe I had been wrong. That maybe the twist wasn't betrayal, wasn't malice. I wanted to tell you everything, he continued, his eyes dark with unspoken weight, but I was scared. Scared of losing you before you even knew the truth. And suddenly, it all began to make sense. The fear, the hesitation, the shadow that flickered across his face whenever a message came through, the distance in his eyes when he was distracted. It hadn't been betrayal. It hadn't been disinterest or manipulation. It had been fear. Fear of vulnerability. Fear of a life bigger than mine, fear of a world he knew I might not be ready for. And yet, somehow, fear hadn't stopped him from coming back to me. I should have walked away. I whispered it to myself, a ghost of a thought, trembling on my lips. I should walk away. So why can't I? Every instinct in me told me to flee. To protect myself from the kind of heartbreak I had already endured. To shield my ordinary life from someone extraordinary. But every fiber of my being, every heartbeat that skipped when I looked at him, every memory of the rain, of his hand on mine, of the city blurring around us, screamed the opposite. He stepped closer, closing the space between us, until I could feel the warmth of him radiating into me. He took my hands in his, steadying the tremor that I hadn't even noticed had taken over my fingers. His thumbs brushed over the back of my hands, slow, deliberate, grounding me in the storm of emotion that had been building for weeks. Because, he said, voice low and steady, almost tender, you belong here. With me. If you want. I felt my breath catch. My knees went weak. My chest felt like it would explode from the sudden, overwhelming intensity of the moment. His hands were warm, safe, anchoring me even as the city raged around us, even as the rain poured down in sheets, soaking our coats, drenching our hair, masking the tremble in my voice and the ache in my chest. And I did. I did want it. I wanted him, the chaos, the thrill, the fear, the passion, the life I hadn't even dared to imagine for myself. I wanted to step into the unknown, to leave the safety of my ordinary life behind, to risk everything for something that made me feel more alive than I had in years. The moment stretched between us, electric, charged, infinite. I could feel the pulse of the city beneath our feet, the hum of neon, the distant honk of taxis, the chatter of passers-by, all irrelevant. All meaningless compared to the heat, the tension, the connection pulsing between us. And yet, even as I leaned into him, as my hands gripped his, as my chest rose and fell in tandem with his, a part of me remained cautious. Fear lingered in the corners of my mind, whispering reminders of who I was, of the life I had fought to keep ordinary, of the pain that could come if I let myself fall too far. But the voice was quieter now, drowned out by something stronger. Desire. Hope. The intoxicating pull of someone who could see me, truly see me, and still choose to stand in the storm with me. I could feel the weight of weeks of uncertainty, heartbreak, longing, and fear lift slightly as I whispered, almost in disbelief, I do. And just like that, the city seemed to exhale with me. The rain softened, the neon reflected with a warmer glow, and the world, so vast, so chaotic, so impossibly overwhelming, suddenly felt like it had made space for us. A tiny, trembling space where two hearts, wild and broken and hopeful, could find each other again. I let myself believe, finally, that maybe this connection, this electric, terrifying, thrilling connection, wasn't just a fleeting spark in the chaos of New York. Maybe it was real. Maybe it was worth the risk. Maybe I was ready. Because for the first time in weeks, for the first time since the storm of jealousy and fear had ripped through my chest, I felt a flicker of peace. Not the ordinary peace of routine, of predictability, of safety. But a different kind of peace, one that whispered that maybe, just maybe, life could be more than ordinary, and maybe, just maybe, I could be more than I had ever allowed myself to be. And I did. I did want it. I did want him. I did. The city hummed around us, a living, breathing organism that paid no attention to the lives of the millions of people scurrying through its streets. Cars honked in sharp bursts. Neon lights flickered, casting garish reflections in the puddles that mirrored the towering skyline above. Steam rose from manhole covers, curling in ephemeral clouds that drifted and disappeared before you could catch them. And yet, in the middle of all that noise, all that chaos, the rush of ordinary lives brushing past mine, it felt as though the world had paused just for us. I had been ordinary. Safe. Invisible. Or at least, I had convinced myself that I was. I was Emma, a girl who made coffee for a living, who knew the exact rhythm of every espresso machine in the cafe I'd called home for years. I knew the sound of the grinder before the beans touched the portafilter. I knew the weight of a perfectly steamed cappuccino foam balanced on the rim of a cup. I knew the lines of customers' faces, their quirks, their repeated orders. I had created a little world for myself, one that was simple, predictable, safe. But then, in one spilled coffee, one shared laugh, one stolen moment in the rain, I had fallen. Utterly. Recklessly. Beautifully. I couldn't tell where my fear ended and my desire began. The two were intertwined, fused like the rain and the asphalt beneath our feet. I could feel the pulse of him in every brush of our hands, in every accidental touch, in every look that lingered just a heartbeat too long. That spark, the one that had set me on fire from the first moment I saw him laughing at my disaster, the coffee tumbling onto his laptop, hadn't faded. It had only grown, building quietly, fiercely, until it consumed everything else. We walked through wet streets, the kind that reflected the city like a kaleidoscope, every puddle catching snippets of neon, headlights, and the occasional passerby rushing past without a care. My fingers intertwined with his, and the simple act of touch felt monumental, as though by holding hands, we were staking our claim on a moment that might otherwise vanish. Emma, he whispered, and my name felt like a soft chord strummed in my chest. I'm glad you came. I wanted to laugh, to shake my head, to remind him that I hadn't really had a choice, that I had been drawn here like a moth to flame. But instead, I felt my chest tighten, and all I could do was nod. My pulse thumped so loudly I thought he could feel it through our joined hands. The city didn't care about us. It never did. And maybe that was part of the thrill, the knowledge that the world was vast, indifferent, and yet, in the midst of its chaos, we had carved out a small, fragile pocket that belonged only to us. I could feel my life shifting beneath me, rearranging itself in ways I hadn't anticipated. Ordinary routines felt distant, almost laughable in their simplicity. The smells of the cafe, the steam from the espresso machines, the soft hum of the air conditioning, they all seemed muted now, pale shadows compared to the electricity that ran between us. I was no longer just a barista in New York City. I was Emma, a girl who had been startled awake by one glance, one smile, one touch. And yet, I couldn't deny the fear. Not entirely. The road ahead was messy. Complicated. Possibly heartbreaking. I knew that. I had seen glimpses already, the fleeting shadow across his face when a message arrived, the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes sometimes darkened when he thought I wasn't looking. He was a man living a life bigger, faster, more intricate than mine. I was still learning how to navigate mine. The gap between us was wide, uneven, and unpredictable. And yet, every step we took together reminded me that some sparks, some connections, weren't meant to be ignored. They demanded attention. They demanded courage. They demanded that you risk everything, even if it meant falling flat, broken, and raw. Emma, he said again, voice low, rich with something I couldn't name, I've waited. I've been terrified, and yet I can't stay away. I looked up at him then, into those eyes that held shadows and light and every secret he hadn't told me yet. And I understood, fully, that he had been just as scared as I had been. Scared of burning, of being exposed, of losing something before it even began. I know, I whispered, words barely audible over the rain and the city. I know the risk. But knowing it didn't make it smaller. Didn't make the pull less powerful. Didn't make the way my chest ached at the thought of losing him any easier. We walked in silence for a few blocks, the rain soaking through our coats, dripping from the edges, plastering our hair to our faces. I felt the rhythm of his heartbeat under my fingers, steady, grounding me even as my own pulse raced. I could feel every inch of him, the warmth of his body, the faint scent of cedar and cologne, the strength in his arms even when they were relaxed at his sides. It was intoxicating. We passed a food cart, the aroma of roasted chestnuts mingling with rain and the faint scent of wet asphalt. My stomach fluttered, not from hunger, but from the proximity of him, from the knowledge that he was real, that this moment was real, and that despite every warning, every shred of logic, I was here. Walking with him. Choosing him. Choosing us. The wind gusted suddenly, whipping through the narrow street, sending droplets of rain across my face. I shivered, and he instinctively drew me closer. I could feel his hand at the small of my back, anchoring me, holding me steady in a world that felt like it might spin out of control at any second. I can't promise the path will be easy, he said quietly. There will be moments of doubt, of fear, of... I know, I interrupted softly, a tremor in my voice. I don't care. I don't care if it's hard. I just want it. I want us. His eyes softened, and for a moment, the city seemed to hush, as if holding its breath. The rain slowed, dripping gently from the eaves above, splashing lightly into puddles that reflected the glow of streetlights. The neon signs cast a kaleidoscope of colors across our faces, pinks, blues, and golds dancing across our skin like something out of a dream. He stopped walking then, gently turning me to face him. His hands cupped my face, thumbs brushing wet strands of hair from my eyes. Are you sure? He asked, and there was no judgment, no hesitation, only a quiet, raw vulnerability that made my chest tighten in ways I hadn't thought possible. I nodded, unable to speak at first. My lips trembled, my pulse thundered, and the city around us became a blur. I whispered finally. I am sure. And then, as if the world itself recognized the gravity of the moment, he leaned in. Closer, closer, until the rain kissed our cheeks and his breath mingled with mine. I felt the warmth of him radiate into me, grounding me, igniting me, reminding me of the danger and the thrill, the risk and the reward of what we were about to do. We didn't speak again for a long time. Words felt inadequate. Insufficient. They couldn't capture the pulse of our hearts, the electricity of touch, the way the rain made everything sharper, every color more vivid, every sensation more acute. We walked through the streets, hands entwined, silently navigating puddles and crowds, sharing glances and small smiles that felt monumental. I felt the world shift around me, the city no longer a place of noise and chaos, but a stage for something entirely new, fragile, terrifying, and beautiful. I realized then that love, real love, wasn't always safe. It wasn't predictable. It didn't come with guarantees or neat endings or easy roads. It was messy, complicated, thrilling, heartbreaking. And yet, it demanded you burn brightly, even if only for a little while. It demanded that you throw yourself into the fire, knowing you might be singed, scorched, or shattered. And I was ready. I had chosen to be ready. Because in that moment, I understood something I hadn't fully allowed myself to feel before. Some connections, some sparks, some people, they don't appear for convenience. They don't wait politely for you to be ready. They strike, fierce and sudden, and they demand that you pay attention, that you feel, that you risk. And I did. I paid attention. I felt. I risked. As we walked on, the rain softening, the neon reflecting like scattered stars and puddles at our feet, I realized something else. This was only the beginning. The city hummed around us, the world continued its indifferent rush, but inside the pocket of space we'd carved, everything else faded. Everything that had been safe, small, and predictable had given way to something bigger, something thrilling, something real. And in that fragile, trembling space, I understood that choosing love, choosing him, was not just a surrender. It was a revolution. It was a declaration. It was the first true breath I had taken in months. Because I had fallen. Utterly. Recklessly. Beautifully. And it was worth it.